this record. I'm trying to do two things, a couple of different things at the same time here. My brain is all over the place. So let's go. Rain. I mean, there is this the greatest? Is this the greatest metal album of all time? It's very possible. It's very possible. Well, one thing I think, just going over its legacy is, and I'm going to try and just talk off the cuff a bit about it. This, I can't confess to, like I said, or I was beginning to say before I was distracted there. I can't confess to having heard it in 1986. I'm not quite that old, but certainly I got Hello Waits maybe in 1987, the end of 1987. So South of Heaven was the first record that I remember coming out and being into Slayer, looking forward to, oh, there's a new Slayer album. And I heard Rain and Blood just before South of Heaven. So that's somewhere in 1988. And over the years, of course, you learn more about the context of the record. You begin to, even a year or two after the record, it's one thing that's crazy as a metalhead, is that in 1988, 1983 seemed like a lifetime ago. So, you know what I mean? You got into metal in 1987, 88, and you were like, oh wow, Kill 'Em All is 1983, Show No Mercy is 1983. And those 4 or 5 years seemed like an eternity. But in reality, now that we're in 2023, they're 35 years ago. So, 1995 is nearer to 1960, so to speak. That's the same breadth of time, 1960 to 1995, then from now to when these records come out. And that breaks my brain in a way. And I think most metalheads of a certain age, from the late 80s or early 90s, that will also break their brain on some level as well, because I kind of often think about records that came out in the early 2000s as new. But, I mean, if you're 20 years old, you weren't even born in the year 2000. Violent Revolution by Creator, that for me is a new Creator record. That was their return to form. That's already 23 years old. And so it's already older than in the year 2000 Terrible Certainty was. 13 years, 1987, yeah. I think Terrible Certainty is 1987, isn't it? It is indeed. But there's something about Rain and Blood, right? That when we were in the, if you're listening to the podcast now, that's the sound of me opening the sleeve. And of course, this is the version with the lyrics. As I understand, the very first versions after the album was delayed for a while as they figured out whether they were going to print the lyrics or not. And because of Angel of Death, I mean, what album opens with the line, Auschwitz, the meaning of pain, the way that I want you to die? I mean, this is just taking things to just some other level that literally nothing else is on. And that's kind of where I wanted to begin with Rain and Blood, because for me, Rain and Blood was and it's the first record that for people outside of metal, that was no fucking joke. Like, that you could play this to anybody, whether they were into hip hop or pop music, and it would literally scare the hell out of them. Before that, of course, Maiden and Priest had their metal image. Maiden in their tight lycra bumblebee stuff, and Priest with the with the Halford kind of leather daddy look, and Kill 'Em All is still life to leather. We're going to kick some ass tonight, and Show No Mercy is still I know her, and there's a certain, of course, almost like gonzo journalism goofiness to early 80s heavy metal, which is its beauty. Don't get me wrong. But Hello Waits, of course, is dark. It's dark as hell. In fact, I would say Haunting the Chapel is the first moment where Slayer really fired a shot across everyone's bows and went, this is serious stuff. I mean, Haunting the Chapel is almost death metal. I think the song Haunting the Chapel is more death metal than maybe any other song that they made. But there is something, and I don't use the word, in its, I suppose it's biblical, predictable meaning, but there's something evil about Rain and Blood. There's something genuinely, actually scary about it, something terrifying, something horrifying. And it was the first record, I think, that came out, and it's the artwork as well. There's no joke about the artwork, although I always thought that the little papal dude here looked a bit like Prince Charles, which always kind of pissed me off a bit. But it's the first record where metal, I think, could be taken deadly seriously. No one could laugh at it. No one. I mean, you could pick up a copy of Ride the Lightning and go, okay, Ride the Lightning. It's got an electric chair on the front, and still be a bit, if you're a bit of a, snobby Talking Heads fan or something, you could go, Master Puppets, of course, came out the same year, and you couldn't, there's very little that anybody could poke fun at that. But Rain and Blood is kind of, it's the big dog in the room. It's absolutely merciless. There isn't a single ounce of flesh or flab on this record. Nothing. It is mercilessly produced, and I still think it's the most extreme record, or the most brutal, the most violent metal record ever made. Of course, you can point to Morbid Angel and Deicide, but this, it's the first record that it feels to me where the outside world went, Jesus fucking Christ, listen to this. This is where metal is. It's no longer a joke. It's no longer goofy. It's no longer kind of like, ha, look at this spotty teenager, spotty oiks music. The whole thing just raised up a level, and fuck knows what it was like if you were in a thrash band at that time. I can only imagine if you were in Exhumer or Living Death or Sacrifice or something, all three great bands, and you went out to the record shop and you called your buddy on the phone and you went, Dave, you got to get down here, I got the new Slayer. And that moment where the needle hit the turntable and Angel of Death came on. I mean, has an album started more out of the gate? Is there an album that started in a more ferocious way than Rain and Blood with Angel of Death? And, you know, it's lyrics and music, Hanneman. Post-mortem, lyrics and music, Hanneman. And music, Rain and Blood, Hanneman. Reborn, Hanneman. Altar of Sacrifice, music, Hanneman. I mean, this is, looking at the back of this here, okay, piece by piece, music, lyric and music is king. But the majority of the music on this is Jeff Hanneman. You can go on YouTube and you can find, there's also a vinyl of it, which are Hanneman's guitar and drum machine, I think, demos for Rain and Blood. And you realise this is his sort of, this is his climbing the peak of his absolute violent creativity. And the album was delayed for a while because of Angel of Death. I think Geffen, I mean, I see the logo on the back here, but they didn't want their logo on it originally, as I read. And it's such a brutal way to start a record. I mean, I don't know if any of you have looked on that YouTube, the sort of AI-generated lyric video. And there's one for Angel of Death where AI has taken the lyrics and sort of gone through them. And it is, like, it's absolutely kind of an incredible interpretation of lyrics, but it's so fucking dark. I mean, this is subject matter that nobody would have dared touch in 1986, and I don't think you'd be able to get away with it now. I think a band opening their album with Auschwitz, the Meaning of Pain, this would be called NS thrash metal or whatever. And throughout the lyrics, I mean, reading the lyrics, it seems to me that there's no judgment. There isn't a judgment on the character of Joseph Mengele in them. It's just a sort of explanation of, in a very violent way, of what happened. And I suppose now that would be judged in a much harsher way than it was in 1986. Like, you read the lyrics of Carnivore or something, you know, the first Carnivore album, or the second Carnivore album especially, and this is on Roadrunner. I don't think these bands would be able to get away with this. And that speaks volumes to where we are as a culture, as a society, in the sense that so many albums from the 70s and 80s probably wouldn't get past the rank and file employees who would be too sensitive to be able to handle the record or press the record. Or maybe I'm being wrong, maybe I'm being grumpy old man, shouts of clouds. It's very possible that I am, but I have a feeling this would be on a tiny small, it would be on Hell's Headbangers or something, and would sell like 6,000 copies or something. It wouldn't be the genre-defining huge record. I mean, I don't know if it sold 1 million copies. I presume Rain and Blood should be 1.2, 1.3 million, 1.1 million or something like that. I presume it should be about sitting around about that 1.5 million copies maybe. I should have probably looked that up before I just randomly threw that out there. Disinformation, misinformation. But it's only 29 minutes long, and it just literally has not a single ounce of flab on it. Now, I mean, I think that an awful lot of the production, it says produced by Rick Rubin and Slayer, but the real hero of this album, it feels to me, is Andy Wallace, because the engineering, nothing has sounded like this before. It even makes Master of Puppets, which is an amazing sounding record, and Peace Elsman, who's buying the other sort of trifecta of brilliant albums from '86. I mean, of course, Among the Living is from I think Among the Living is the beginning of '87, but it's around the same period. They all took a huge step up production-wise, but this is on a completely different level. Def Jam is such a weird choice, but it seems that Rubin met the band at some sort of European music convention and really pushed to have them. And previous to that, Def Jam was known for like LL Cool J and Run DMC. My mate, I used to have a mate across the road I used to play snooker with. This is a bit of an aside. And we used to listen to records and play snooker in his house when we were like kids. And he always used to play LL Cool J. And he was fascinated by Rain and Blood because of that. And so he just couldn't believe when I brought this over. They're like, well, this is on Def Jam, which was known for, I mean, he was into Public Enemy and LL Cool J stuff. And you probably heard me talk about how much I liked the first 1-2 Public Enemy albums at the time. Anyway, I digress. It's a very strange choice for a label. Most of the other thrash bands at the time were going with, Capitol Records or making that step up. And I have to say that there was the old heavy metal scene brought out those young thrash bands. I mean, Slayer were brought out by Wasp when Wasp were on, I guess, inside the Electric Circus. I mean, fucking hell, Slayer fans were so rabid at the time. I cannot see them putting up with the Cowboy Wasp, like the Cowboy Electric Circus Wasp, and apparently they didn't really. Megadeth were brought out by Alice Cooper, which is where the No More Mr. Nice Guy cover comes from. I think is a sort of debt of gratitude. Even though that's kind of, weirdly enough, as a huge Megadeth fan, when No More Mr. Nice Guy came out, I kind of clocked out with Megadeth for a little while. Metallica were brought out by Ozzy, right? Which, we're talking 86, 87. So 88 is No Rest for the Wicked. What Ozzy record would that be? I suppose that would be Post Ultimate Sin, maybe. You're probably shouting at me in the comments if that's wrong. And Anthrax seem to have got the plum one. They were brought up by Iron Maiden in 88. So all those, the big four got a big step up and a big helping hand from rock and thrash metal, which I have to say that they never quite gave back to death metal when death metal came up. Like in 1991, Slayer never brought out Obituary, so to speak. Megadeth never brought out Sepultura. Megadeth didn't bring out, or Metallica didn't bring out the bands in the late 80s, early 90s. Now probably Joe from Gamma Bomb is going to say, well, they brought out Armored Saint and Overkill. Well, maybe they did. I don't think so, but they certainly didn't give death metal the leg up that the thrash metal bands got from heavy metal. But there's a feeling, I remember getting a cassette of this somewhere in 88 and letting a couple of people hear it, and who were not into metal, and it literally, they couldn't fathom what was going on at all. And now you read back and you go through reviews in the music press and all this kind of stuff. Now the album is named as, like seventh heaviest album of all time, blah, 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 blah. Well, those albums ahead of it better be fucking Black Sabbath, or there's going to be trouble. I couldn't be bothered going to the 100 list. But what really, you're going to put, like, I don't know, Slipknot is heavier than this? Maybe if you're a 21-year-old kid, I don't know. But the thing about thrash metal, in a sense like this, to me, thrash metal is more brutal than death metal. That may be controversial, but it's because death metal, in a sense, like, don't get me wrong, Onto the Madness is, for me, almost the equivalent of this record. But death metal became too choppy, technical for a lot of bands, and less about actual just violence, aggression. And that's the key to Rain and Blood, is that it's make metal hate again. It is so spiteful, so fucking hateful. And that's what makes it so beautiful. Is it's sheer unbridled, some would say, toxic masculinity, and that's its glory. Its dumbness is its glory, and I don't mean that in an offensive sense. I mean that it's an absolute blunt force trauma. It's an absolute brick to the head. There's no second guessing any moment on it. There's no allusions to, well, we've got to put in this to seem progressive, we've got to seem that. It's just absolute, stripped down, super muscular, and it's like the Usain Bolt of extreme music. You know what I mean? It's the 100-meter dash, never to be beaten by, in my opinion, it will never be topped. It will never be, nothing will ever be as lean and mean and violent as Rain and Blood. And that's what makes it beautiful. That's its glory, is that there's nothing second guessing it. There's no element which is, maybe we shouldn't write that, maybe we shouldn't put those lyrics in. There's no sop to what we consider now part of modern society, modern culture, this constant affirmation of, or this constant need to always second guess your instinct with, I suppose, the sort of damping down of that atavistic primal spirit is what I'm trying to get to, and that's what Rain and Blood is. Rain and Blood is pure animal. It's pure instinct. It's just fueled with spite and hatred. And all of these things which are the original blueprint of heavy metal, the original original testosterone and adrenaline pushed to the max. It's not meant to be intellectually analysed or thought about too hard. Of course, the songwriting chops and the playing, and you've got Dave Lombardo, one of the greatest drummers ever. I mean, of course, the playing is incredible. You know, you think they're not good musicians? Get the fuck out of here. Because this is before cut and paste, and this is before digitalization. This is when a band actually had to rehearse every fucking day to be this tight, and there isn't a note out of place. There isn't a there isn't. You barely even hear any clunks or anything at all in the production, and you know that's them in a room playing together. And it may sound strange to say, but this was back in a time when metal was, you know, it was virgin territory. It was primitive. It didn't second guess itself like now, because I think that, you know, society in a sense kind of knows too much to be this instinctual sometimes. Not all the time, but at least in the mainstream. And it's like, you know, I'm trying to think of you know, we in Ireland, we've had a great history of banning novels and banning writers. I'm trying to think of something very primal. Nothing comes to mind. That was a good moment in a podcast. Wasn't a good moment in a video. I will surely think of something as soon as I press the stop button. But getting back to that idea that this is its glory, its beauty, it's the thing that will never be bettered, is that it has no element of second guessing. There's no element of confused and compromised pseudo-intellectuality about it. It's just rain and blood. And it's before, oddly enough, it's before Araya gets any writing credits. I think after this record they kind of split into two camps, and they weren't really getting along very well. But Araya comes in South of Heaven with some brilliant lyrics. Mandatory Suicide. South of Heaven is a brilliant lyric. I mean, where could Slayer go after that? I think they could only go to South of Heaven. Now there's another universe somewhere, you know, in the quantum string thrash metal universe, where Slayer follow Spill the Blood, South of Heaven, into Seasons in the Abyss, and a kind of more mature, darker, slower songwriting thing, and they don't go backwards to Divine Intervention and all the records that followed after that, songs about rugby and stuff like this. But Araya introduces a very dark fundament element to South of Heaven, and I think that's the only place they could have gone. And that's the album, that's the first one where I joined right as it came out. I can only imagine, as I said, the competition. If you're Destruction or whoever else, and the day you come back from the record store with this and you just think, Jesus Christ, the competition, like it just got very hot in the kitchen. How are we even able to compete with this? Of course, the legacy is that Jeff Hanneman died. I saw the show at Wacken, I think in 2006, and they, you know, the 20-year anniversary show, and it was great. I mean, I saw quite a few Slayer shows. One of the best ones was in about 2000. Myself and Darren and Victus went, and they played like loads of old songs. They played Necrophiliac, they played Chemical Warfare, all sorts of amazing old stuff. But that show in Wacken in 2006, unfortunately, one of my best memories of it is Vader coming on afterwards and being like a third as loud again, which was kind of annoying. That Slayer's soundman seemed to play it so safe. Well, so what else have we got here? If you're listening on the podcast, you won't see this, but you might see it on YouTube. Criminally Insane 12-inch remix. Again, I don't really understand. I used to have the 7-inch of this, which I've never seen ever before, and a friend of mine stood on it. He was in my room pretending to play air guitar and headbanging so much, I have a feeling he might have been sniffing glue as well. And then he fell over and went and stood on it, made a little hole on it, and then he agreed to buy it off me for £5, which was a lot in 1990. Aggressive Perfector, the first song Slayer ever recorded. This is like this is on the old Metal Blade samplers, Aggressive Perfector. I presume most people have this. Criminally Insane is one of the oddest songs on it, that infamous drum beat. Then you have Postmortem. Cool Image, great shirt from the time, and again it kind of has the same songs on it, which is bizarre. Postmortem, Criminally Insane remix version, and then Aggressive Perfector. So Postmortem is just this, along with the song Postmortem. They couldn't have put any demos on it. I have one shirt. This won't make much sense to you on podcast, but this is the ugly dog, sort of cowhead dog devil thing or whatever. I bought that somewhere in 1987, maybe in Virgin. Was it Virgin Makes? Do I not? It has the Rain in Pain dates on the back, but they're so. Can you see that? Who knows? You can't see that. It's so old. Incredibly ugly shirt, as an awful lot of Slayer merch was. For some reason, they. I don't know whether they outsourced all their merch designs to somebody who just hadn't got a clue, but there's a few cool with the Altar of Sacrifice ones with all their little devils, and the Satanic Virmak one is cool. But even on the last show I saw them, the kind of farewell tour, lots of the backdrops and lots of the hangings, you're like, really, is that the best we can do? The AI artwork on the Angel of Death video on YouTube was far more evil than the backdrops they had hanging. But, like I said, there was just something glorious. Almost like gonzoid, just like absolutely, how can we say, utterly relentless about Rain and Blood. There isn't a single note out of place. I'm running out of hyperlatives really here, which is kind of boring to listen to if you're listening to on a podcast. Reborn, Jesus Saves. I mean, that Altar of Sacrifice, Altar of Sacrifice, Into Jesus Saves is one of the greatest two moments. I mean, in every heavy metal album, when it drags into that, and it's almost like what became known as like a breakdown. Of course, it had a big influence. There's no doubt about it on death metal, and you can hear lots of death thrash, and lots of their riffs seeping into early death metal. There's no doubt. I mean, you couldn't be in a band really and not be influenced by Slayer. It's when I hear somebody say, "I don't really like Slayer," I just wonder, like, really? Kind of suggests to me that you don't really know anything about heavy metal if you don't really like Slayer. If you want to go and refer back to I made a YouTube video which was just only about going through the catalogue of Slayer, which for me, I'm not even a huge fan of Seasons in the Abyss. I like it, of course, but I'm not a big fan of songs like Expendable Youth and the kind of ghetto songs, whatever you call them, digga digga dunka dunka dunk dunka da. It seems like a bit of a dinky riff to me, but it's still a great record. And after that, really nothing. But maybe, in the grand scheme of things, Slayer gave us four of the most amazing records in heavy metal history, and possibly the greatest record in heavy metal history. And I think that heavy weighs the crown and all that kind of thing, and it weighs quite heavily over the band's creativity, because heavy metal is a kind of it's about the impetuosity of youth. The early blueprint is just so linked to that incredible frenetic energy of being a young person in the world, and, as I said, not second guessing your motives or your instincts, and being poor and fighting for every scrap and getting in the van, and all those things that are the very instinctual impulses are very often define early heavy metal. They're very hard to return to when you're 50 years old, or 55 or 60. You can find your way back to the beginning, and I quite enjoy the new Metallica and Megadeth records. They're not so bad. But it's quite hard to tap back into that incredible place you were at 21 years old, the wide-eyed way you view the world, and full of aggression and testosterone, and just being a dumb, ferocious character in the world. I'm doing lots of hand signals here, if you didn't know on the podcast. But anyway, it's a bit of a stopgap podcast, I do actually admit that, and it will come out as a little video on my YouTube channel along with a few other things, but my head is absolutely fried from doing interviews all week, and I just was listening to Rain and Blood to just, purge the senses, and I thought, God damn it, let's talk about Rain and Blood today. So my friends, Agitators Anonymous is, In Praise of Death, We're Only Living to Die, is 25 minutes of discussion. Actually, can I say stuff for 20 more seconds to bring it to the 29-minute mark, so that this random ramble is almost exactly the length of Rain and Blood? You know me. Of course, I have enough things to say for another 20 or 30 seconds. Like I said, go and check it out on YouTube channel, and you can see my dumb face. I myself am off to play a gig. And so, my friends, Agitators Anonymous, I will see you next week. Keep the faith. Let's do it.